Here in News Center 5, Janet Wu, our political reporter. Our guest from Massachusetts, Tim Murray. A normally uncontroversial post, the Lieutenant Governor's early morning crash in a state car on November 2nd, and questions about his fundraising has put him under the media microscope. And this is because of doubts and unanswered questions about his story. We will get into that. But now, in his second term, the Lieutenant Governor is a Worcester native. He was the mayor of his home city for 3 terms before being elected Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth back in 2006. Mr. Murray, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Lieutenant Governor, let's sort of review what's happened. Shortly after your 5 a.m. November 2nd car crash, you said you were looking at storm damage, although it was pitch black at that hour. You also said you were out for a cup of coffee. Now, your story was that you hit black ice and that you were not speeding. You had the presence of mind after such a dramatic event to take this legal and political precaution.
I asked the troopers, I said, you know, for everyone's protection and to ensure that nobody can question, I asked them for a field breath test, and I blew that with a 000, so there was no alcohol involved.
But then your story shifted considerably.
And then this month, after the vehicle's black box was examined, a different revelation, that you hadn't hit black ice, that you were traveling over 100 miles an hour. This is what you said then.
The speed is frightening to me. As I said, this happened within seconds, and I believe, as I said, that I fell asleep. And I've said throughout the outset, I'll let the state police do their job and make their findings.
And your November story about wearing a seatbelt was also wrong.
I certainly thought I was wearing my seatbelt, but again, I'm going to accept responsibility.
And through these shifting stories of what happened, you've refused to reveal your cell phone records for that day.
I can tell you I was not on the phone, I was not emailing, I was not texting. I know that, I can tell you that. It's not something I ordinarily do while in the car, while driving, and you'll have to take my word for it.
You've heard all of these sound bites from yourself numerous times. You're probably exhausted from hearing that. But let's hear your final version. What happened that morning as far as you can remember at this point in time?
Well, you know, anytime you're in an accident, this was an accident, very serious accident that happened in a matter of seconds. And I think if people were to take the time and go back and look at the transcript of my remarks in the press conference hours after that accident, I felt it was important to explain to the media and to the public what happened to the best of my recollection. And I did that. And then when the black box was released, after I asked it to be released, the Secretary of State made a preliminary ruling that was a public record, even though the state police only access that information when there's a death or serious injury. I again sat in front of the media and answered 25 questions to the best of my ability, and many of the facts have been consistent. I woke up that morning, went out with the intention of grabbing a coffee and a newspaper. I decided along the way to go for a ride. There was a significant storm that had hit and you made a series of accusations, and I'm going to finish. I'm going to answer the question.
Absolutely.
And there was a serious storm that hit the area. I have headlights. You can get a sense of the damage, and on the way back, an accident happened. All the data, all the various black boxes, analysts that have said I was driving at 75 miles an hour, and in a matter of seconds, the vehicle accelerated and had the accident. I've taken full responsibility for the accident. I feel terrible that it's happened. I'm going to pay for the car. I don't know what else I can do, but take responsibility.
You have told reporters that you were worried about a bunch of things that morning, and you had a lot on your mind. That was part of the reason why you went on a ride. What were you worried about? Were you thinking about Michael McLaughlin, which the news had just broken a couple of days before that?
You know, again, somebody reports something or says something, and they all say that I said that. What I have said consistently is I woke up around sometime after 2 o'clock in the morning, tried to go back to sleep. You know, why couldn't you go back to sleep? Well, there's a lot of things on my mind. Certainly the situation in Chelsea was very troubling to me. We had a major storm with parts of the state that went with power without a week. There's a number of things that were on my mind, that included, and that situation still makes me very frustrated. Two
of the things that you hear as the story goes on, as you try to analyze it. First of all, people have regularly said it was, what was it, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. What can you see beyond the reach of your headlights?
It was about the accident was about 5:20.
5:20. What can you see at that time of year beyond the reach of your headlights to examine storm damage?
Today you can drive along the highways and see still some of the storm damage from that storm. If not
at 5:20 in the morning.
You have headlights. You can get a sense of the storm damage, what's going on. I mean, listen, I take rides. It's something that I do. I've done that since I was mayor. Just to get in the car, clear your head a little bit, get a sense, look at project. That's what I was doing.
And physically, you look at that car. John Kerry got injured in a hockey game, and he looks like he was in a wreck. You look unscathed.
Well,
the difference, it's remarkable.
Well, I'm thankful to be alive, and I'm more thankful that nobody else was involved or hurt.
I guess my question is, you didn't remember whether you had your seatbelt on or not. You don't remember whether at the time you thought it was black ice. You don't remember falling asleep. How can you be so clear that you were not on the phone and you were not talking?
Because I know I was not on the phone. I was not texting, was not on the phone, was not meeting anyone. All these things.
Why not reveal the cell phone
Listen,
records?
the Secretary of State is looking at that, but this isn't just about my accident in terms of the phone records. There's also a legitimate public policy question here that I think needs to be answered.
What is that?
Well, if the governor is recruiting a company to bring 800 jobs to Massachusetts, that CEO might want that phone to be confidential. And I'm not naive enough. Listen, I'm taking a lot of political heat for this, and I get that, but I'm not naive enough to think that there aren't, well, Governor, were you talking to this company or that company? There's implications here that I wish some people would think about. I understand this isn't helpful to me politically and otherwise, but there is a public policy question that should be looked at and answered.
So you're making the distinction maybe between the state cell phone and your private cell phone, right? What if you released your private cell phone at that time?
Listen, I was not on the phone. I was not texting. I was not emailing. People can question that. I've tried to be as proactive as possible. I asked for the breathalyzer. When it deviated from state policy, I still asked that the black box information be released. I'm not going to satisfy everybody. I know that.
Why don't you release at least your personal cell phone records to show that you were not on your personal phone?
I was not on the phone. I was not emailing. I was not texting. I was not meeting anybody. And I know people aren't, not everyone's going to be satisfied with
The
that.
Globe has reported there are 193 phone calls between you and Chelsea Housing Director Michael McLaughlin since 2010. Former director. Is that accurate? To the best of your knowledge?
I haven't gone and looked at my phone records, but Ed, I do hundreds and hundreds of phone calls a week. Part of my
fair enough, but almost 200 is
part of my portfolio. I do literally hundreds and hundreds of phone calls a week. Part of my portfolio as Lieutenant Governor, one of the reasons I ran for Lieutenant Governor, was to work with local officials at various levels. Part of my portfolio as Lieutenant Governor is working on housing and homelessness issues, which housing authorities are part of that. So I talked to a lot of people, and he was one of them. I'm as angry as anyone about what happened. This administration took swift action when we learned the full facts of what happened there. As a political supporter, I also feel tremendously let down by what he did. And as someone who spent a lot of his adult life working around issues of housing and homelessness, it's outrageous what happened.
Before all of this broke, what was your relationship with Mr. McLaughlin? How close were you to him? You have called him a campaign volunteer, but here he was, introducing you at fundraisers. He was, according to the Boston Globe, raising thousands of dollars for you. I mean, how could you have thought that he was just a campaign volunteer if he's calling you this frequently and he's introducing you at fundraisers?
As I said, I talk with him oftentimes on policy issues, those types of issues. He also was one of I've said consistently, one of about a dozen political supporters that were with me early on when I ran in 2006. And he's someone who I would talk to from time to time about politics.
How close are you to him? Were you to him?
You can characterize it any way you want, because many are going to do that. I would consider he was.
We'll let you characterize.
I said he was one of a dozen people. Was an early supporter that I worked with on housing and homelessness issues. He was a leader in the National Association of Housing Authorities and Redevelopment Authorities, the Massachusetts chapter. So I dealt with him on several different levels, and let me just be clear. What he did was wrong. I'm outraged, and these allegations about him soliciting funds, as soon as I read about that, we've asked OCPF to look into it.
These are two very important stories that if they're connected, at this moment in time, we can't, you won't confirm whether they are connected or not. The accident itself and McLaughlin. Here's the bottom line. Here's the question I have for you on the book.
The accident was an accident. It happened in seconds.
So you will not release the state cell phone records?
Ed,
right?
I've told you I was not on the phone, was not emailing, was not texting, and we'll let the Secretary of State make his decision. But I think beyond this is beyond. But
if you weren't, release the records.
There's also an important public policy issue that needs to be, whether it's Governor Romney, whether it's Governor Patrick, future governors, should every governor have to explain the content and context of each and every phone call? I think we need to talk about that. But since
there have been inconsistencies in your story about what happened that morning, can you understand why people now
the
want
only two inconsistencies, I understand there's an inconsistency about the speed, but all the various data said I was traveling at 75 miles per hour in the moments before the accident happened. I certainly thought I was wearing my seatbelt. The data says different. I'm going to accept responsibility for it.
Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray is our guest on OTR. Stay with us.
News Center 5 has politics covered. Commitment 2012. Live coverage from the Florida primaries, local Senate and House races. Unsurpassed commitment. We have politics covered. News Center 5 and thebostonchannel.com.
Did you know almost 35 million American men experience hair loss? If you're one of them, let Providence Hair Restoration Center restore your hair and your self-confidence. Our transplant options are scarless with